My first question is that, you have served on local government for almost 4 to 5 years, which was an entry to your public life. We really wanted to hear from you. What made you enter public life? Is there a particular experience or incident that inspired or challenged you to consider a role in public life?
So there was. So I've been involved in politics for, at that time, around 25 years. But I really didn't think that I would ever enter public life. But there were a couple of moments in my life. And the first one's a really predictable one, and I'm sure it's actually influenced a number of women. But it was when Donald Trump was elected as the president of the United States. And it was a little bit of a shock to me that someone who was very obvious in terms of some of the racist things and the sexist things that he was saying, could then reach the heights of being the leader of the United States of America. At the time of his election, I have 2 daughters, and I remember thinking to myself, goodness, I don't want this to be what they believe is leadership. And I come from a Greek background, and so that was really important to me to show them a different form of leadership. So that was probably the first time that I really thought, you know what, I need to step up and really move into some form of public life and some form of leadership position. The second thing that I guess guided me was actually more personal, and I think it's something that many women face, particularly those who have children, and that was, how would I do this if I was to do it? But my husband, I came home one night, I'd been working late, helping some people, and he said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Sorry," and he said, "You're so busy getting everyone else elected. When are you going to get yourself elected?" And that to me was an actual indication that I was going to get the support that I needed as a woman, with a very supportive partner that I have in my husband, to be able to do this. Because as I said, I've got children, I've got elderly parents. It's not an easy thing to take on, but that was kind of, I guess, that the point at which I thought, you know what, maybe I could do this.
We've heard you already speaking of some of the barriers, but it would be good to hear more in detail. So what were some of the barriers, either individually and as you just mentioned about your personal life, to public life that you faced? And what are the challenges women from marginalized communities face, in your opinion, as well?
Yeah, so I think that women tend to, and this is something I worked out, I think women want to be perfect at something before they put themselves forward. They want to know that they can do it 100% well. And what I've learned over my time, whether it was in my work or whether it's in public life, is that men don't do that. Men don't necessarily wait for those opportunities to come to them. They just go for them. And then if they're not 100% great at it, it doesn't matter. They'll learn on the job. So that's something that I think has been a barrier to me, because I remember, thinking, oh no, I'm not good enough for this role, or I'm not ready to step forward into this role. But as I've gone through my life of work and things that I've done politically, I've worked out that there is never a good time. There's only an opportunity to sort of jump in and say yes to opportunities. And what you normally find is you're actually pretty good at it, and you're doing okay. So I think that's something that I think many women face as a bit of a barrier. They put a sort of stop on themselves as something to do. Obviously, yeah, as I mentioned, your personal life, particularly as a woman, which, it tends to be much busier because, whether you have a family or whether you're working or you have parents that you need to support, all of those things I think come into it as well. So I think there's sometimes a bit of a barrier as well. And also I think politically too, men tend to put themselves forward in political positions more so than women. And so as a result, we were finding that women weren't taking up those opportunities. And what you see then is just a parliament of men. So I think that some of the things that we've done in terms of that have been really important. I think particularly for marginalised women, one of the things, particularly coming from a background, a multicultural background, is I think language is sometimes really difficult for women, and understanding nuances and that sort of side of it can be, I think, a little bit of a challenge as well. When I was younger, I didn't speak English. It's a personal experience that carries me through. And so I'm really conscious of that when I meet people, and maybe they'll apologise to me if they can't speak very well. But to me, it doesn't matter. I get it. I get the gist of it. But I think that can be a particular barrier, particularly for women of migrant and minority backgrounds as well.
So one of the 12 critical areas of the Beijing Platform for Action is institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women. So again, in your opinion and in your career, what do you think the public policies or structural decisions have been enablers for you to enter public life? Is there any specific quotes or examples that you would like to use?
Yeah. One of the things here in Queensland that we're very fortunate to have is we have a dedicated Minister for Women, which is really important. And we also do a lot of reporting, statistical reporting on how women and men fare, in our state. And a key element of that is that we have a women on boards policy where we actually stipulate that on all government boards, 50% will be women. And that was really important because I was actually able to be on a government board for a period of time. Such an incredible learning experience for me. But I'm not sure I would have had that opportunity if there wasn't that mechanism there to actually push me forward and to be able to take that role on. So I think that there are those sort of things that I think can help. Politically, within my political party, which is the Australian Labor Party, we spent 20 years debating it, but we got there to have what are called affirmative action quotas. And what that means is that we have recognised that it isn't about a token woman being offered a political seat. What it's saying is that there are many women out there who deserve it, but they need that additional assistance to get there. And so we've now got a rule within our state that parliaments must have 40% of, like our parliament, side of parliament must have 40% of women. That goes up to 45% in 2022 and 50% in 2025. And I think that was very helpful for me as well when I was first running for a seat of parliament, because it was recognised that I would make up that 40% of women in our side of parliament. And it's working really, really well. And, people do say, oh, you're just getting it because you're a woman. No, I think what it's saying is that, you are good enough. Here is a mechanism to help you. But I think it also means that you get better quality male candidates because they have less seats that they have access to. So therefore quality rises. And I think that makes a better parliament for everyone.
Definitely. So how, we've spoken about, enablers, we spoke about barriers and the policies different from those that you've been able to work on in Australia. But I guess my question is that, how are all these barriers and policies and enablers are different from those that the country you have grown up? And you just mentioned you're from a Greek background. Do you see any differences? Is it easier here, or do you think that it's much easier for women in your own country to be working within this into a public forum?
Yeah, look, I think Greece has come a long way. I think that, they were a very traditional type of country where women had a very set role, which was to be the caretaker, which was to be at home. But I think that certainly has changed. I lived in Greece when I was quite young, so it was a little bit difficult to really experience it at that level. But I do recall something that happened when I was living. So we lived in Greece in the 70s. It was at a time when there was still a military government in Greece. And my mother, so my family moved from Australia to Greece, but my mother had grown up in Australia, and politically there was a freedom around politics. And I recall this because I remember the conversation. She was asking some of her friends, who are you going to vote for in the upcoming election? And they all shushed her and said, no, we don't talk about those things. So there was a real lack of political freedom, I think, for a period of time. And I think that that's something that obviously is a barrier in many countries around the world, that people don't have the capacity to communicate freely about their political ideas, their political wishes. And I think that that's particularly dangerous. But that's certainly something that I recall, even as a young child. I think I must have been 7, but I remember overhearing that conversation and my mum feeling quite confused because, you know, she'd grown up in Australia where people, you know, quite actively talked about, well, I'm voting for this party or I'm voting for this person, and it was never an issue. But over there, it was really regarded as you don't talk about it, because obviously there were repercussions for talking about those kind of political beliefs.
What advice would you give to young migrant and refugee women who would like to enter the public life? Do you have a message to the next generation of women from culturally diverse communities who are marginalized?
So my first bit of advice, which I actually give all young women, you know, regardless of their status, but all young women, but certainly I think it really applies to young women of migrant and marginalised backgrounds, is just say yes. So if an opportunity comes up, just say yes. Don't say no. Don't think about it too much. Say yes, because I can guarantee that you will be okay. You will get there. I think that that's really important for young women who are interested in joining public life and, you know, potentially being a member of parliament or working a local council or federal parliament. I think that I feel that, you know, for the most part, you do need to be part of a political party. I think it's really, it's important because you learn a lot through that time, but you learn a lot about how politics works in Australia. And I think that's really important. I'm very fortunate in that I get to meet a lot of young women within our political party, and I take on, I guess, a two-prong role. And this is the other thing I would encourage young women to think about. I get a lot of young women who say, oh, can you be my mentor? And I'm always happy to give advice and offer suggestions, but I think mentorship is one of those things that is quite personal. I think you get to know someone very well, and then you can offer them the advice based on their individual circumstances. So if you can find someone like that in your life as a young woman who can help you and give you that advice, that honest feedback, because sometimes it has to be honest to say, you know, you should do this or you should do that. But the other part is what I call sponsorship, and that's a little bit different to mentorship, because what that is having people in your life who will push you forward for opportunities, who will actually ring someone for you and say, I think this young woman would be perfect for this role. And I think those are things that, you know, are really important, I think, for young women in particular, because they aren't always as confident. And I certainly wasn't at you know, when I was younger. But what I did have very clearly is I had mentors, people I could turn to and ask for advice.